Joking.
Okay, there we are. Okay, so we're here. No pictures in the comment.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to start. So we have in front of you is the paper says the name of Chanukah. So with every other holiday, we know, or at least somewhere in the script of the holiday tells you why the name is the name it is, right? Purim, the verse says that Purim means the lots, right? Because on Purim, Haman cast lots. Pesach, we know why it's called Pesach. Pesach means to jump over, and God passed over the Jewish homes. Shavuos means weeks, as in the 7 weeks counting up. Sukkot are huts, the huts we stay in, etc. Chanukah is a little bit more elusive. Is that the right word?
Elusive,
Yeah? Okay. So we're going to give 5 different translations, and each of the translations have a few different meanings, as we shall see. The order in which these translations are being presented are not in any particular order. In fact, translation number 3 is probably the most historically accurate one in terms of what they actually meant when they called it Chanukah the first time. But we'll go through them from top to bottom. Okay, so the first of them is it's the most popular just because I think when I was in school they taught this to us first. Chanukah, the word Chanukah is divided into 2 words. Chanu, Chaf He. So that's why I printed there. You can see the number 1 there. Chanu, Chaf He. Chanu, Chaf He means they rested on the 25th. Now, what does it mean they rested on the 25th? Rested from what? And who is doing the resting? So, the second little circle there, as it says, is, as I read it, Tzchaniya M'Milchama. That is, they rested from the battle on the 25th, right? They were battling up until the 25th of Kislev. On the 25th of Kislev, they rested, or they won the battle, and then they entered the temple. So that's the first translation of the word Chanukah. They rested on the 25th, meaning they rested from battle. The second meaning of this same translation, they rested on the 25th, comes from the Bach, who says the following. The Maharil is who's known as the father of all Ashkenazic minhagim, all Ashkenazic custom, mourning. And he writes a number of different customs with respect to this idea that people refrain from working on Chanukah, similar to Purim, and to some degree even similar to biblical holidays. If not, it's not an actual rest day, like we still use electricity and whatnot, but there's some element of rest. He mentions a few different customs, some who don't work on the first and the last day, some who rest on just the first day, and at least some who don't do work for the first half hour while the candles are lit, specifically women who don't work for the first half hour after the candle is lit because they were particularly persecuted, and therefore the miracle is particularly pertinent to them. So there is an element of rest on Chanukah, even if it's not like a holiday, like a biblical holiday. And that's the second meaning of the word Chanukah. Chanu Chaf He, they rested on the 25th, as in there is a custom not to work on the 25th day, not to work during Chanukah. So the same meaning of the word, but same translation, 2 different meanings. Chanu Chaf He, they rested on the 25th in history.
When does that day fall? The
25th of Kislev. The first day of Chanukah is the 25th of Kislev. Yeah. So it's the same, it's one translation, but 2 different meanings. They rested on the 25th, either they rested from battle, or rested on the 25th, as in there is an element of rest, of not working on the 25th of Kislev. Do you want to pass this down to anybody else who wants there? Both of these translations, both of these meanings are nice, but they don't fully satisfy, because each for their own reason. Translating Chanu Chaf He, they rested on the 25th as a historical statement, they rested from battle on the 25th, is a little bit problematic because the battles continued even after Chanukah. It wasn't like they threw the Greeks out of Israel and that was the end of it. Battles continued to go afterwards, and it took, I think, some 20-something years till they made a truce with the Greeks. So it doesn't fully satisfy to say that Chanukah means they rested on the 25th of Kislev from battle, because their battles continued. Hi, morning. And as far as the halachic idea of resting on the 25th, resting from work, obviously that doesn't satisfy because it's not a real resting. It's only some customs, and it's only a half hour after the menorah is lit, plus it's a half hour after the menorah lit every day, not just 25th. But it's still there hinted to in the word Chanukah, resting on the 25th, some sort of resting, either resting from the war and history or resting on the 25th from work in the halachic sense, or at least in the custom sense. A third meaning to the word Chanukah, they rested on the 25th. And that is as follows. If you count, so you can see it here, number 1, the third dot. So I write here, Chanias Vashar Sachaf Hey, the resting of the presence of the 25 letters of Shema Yisrael. If you count the letters of the word of the phrase Shema Yisrael, there are 25 letters. You can count it later. And if you count the letters in the phrase Baruch Shem Kvei Malchus Levad, which is the phrase we read right after Shema Yisrael, there are 24 letters. 25 and 24. So says this commentary, is a Kabbalistic work called the Yisod V'Shardish HaAvodah. He says that the resting of the 25th means that the presence of the 25, the presence of the 25 letters of Shema are present, are rested, like the Shekhinah rests on the 20, not on the 25th, but on Chanukah 25. The words of Shema Yisrael rest on the 25th, as opposed to the 24th, as opposed to the 24 letters of Baruch Shem. What's the difference between Baruch Shem and Shema Yisrael? Right? We have access on Chanukah to the Shema Yisrael, to the 25 letters of Shema Yisrael. What's Shema Yisrael, and what's the difference between that and Baruch Shem? And the truth is, if you think about it, the meaning of Shema Yisrael and the meaning of Baruch Shem are really the same thing. Hear, O Israel, God is our Lord, God is one. What are we saying? Not that just one God and no two, but we're saying that God's the only reality. Right? The word Echad, the last of Shema Yisrael, is Aleph, one God, Ches, 8, 7 heavens and the earth, Daled, the 4 corners of the world. So we're declaring that God's the only true reality. And Baruch Shem is the same thing. Blessed be the glory of the kingdom of his name forever and ever. What are we saying? That God's the sovereign over the whole earth. So we're also saying that God's the only reality. But they're very different in the way we say them. In the phrase Shema Yisrael, we say God's name 3 times. Hear, O Israel, God is our Lord, Hashem Elokeinu, God is one. And we make no mention of creation. We allude to creation in the word Echad. Ches is 7 heavens and the earth. Dalet is 4 corners of the world. But we don't mention existence. We just mention God's unity. And we understand this means to say that God's the only reality even in this world. Whereas Baruch Shem is the reverse. In the phrase Baruch Shem Kvei Malchus Levad, we don't mention God's name at all. Blessed be the glory of his kingdom, of his name, forever and ever. We make no mention of his name. We just talk about him like in the third person, like he. And we do mention the world, la'olam vad, forever and ever. The word la'olam means world, as in existence. For all of existence, for all of eternity, God is sovereign. Right? So it's the same sentence, but very different. One, we describe the earth, we describe existence, and we say, if you dig a little deeper, you know, existence is really God. Whereas the first phrase is the other way. God's the only reality. Oh, there's an existence? Yeah, he made that. It's the reverse. So I'll give you a practical way of looking at it. Give an example. Okay, so one way is like this. Let's use candles. Menorah and Shabbos candles. So one way to look at candles is like this. There's candles in the world. There's fire in the world. Okay, let's sanctify candles. How are we going to sanctify candles? By using it for the menorah and using it for Shabbos candles. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is the reverse. There's something called Shabbos candles. There's something called Chanukah. Oh, in order to do that we need candles? Okay, fine, we'll create candles. Which one comes first? Following?
Wow.
Is there candles, and because we need to sanctify candles, we have a commandment to light candles? Or is it the reverse? There's a commandment to light candles. In order for that commandment to be fulfilled, we need to create candles. So which one comes first? The godly reality, and everything else is just a consequence? Or do we start off with the reality that we have, and if we dig a little deeper, we find godliness? They're the same conclusion, but from a different perspective. From God's perspective versus from our perspective.
Also, one is time, one represents time, and the other represents natural world. In other words, time is when you have to do it. It's Chanukah or Shabbos, it's a specific time. And the other one is the actual candle or whatever, or fire, which is part of nature.
Kind of. And let's put it this way. If we look at it the first way, then candles, the existence of candles are justified without the menorah and without Chanukah and without Shabbos candles.
Okay.
In order to sanctify it, we have Chanukah and Shabbos candles. Or candles have no justification. The only reason why candles exist is because God said you should light candles on Shabbos. And that's the only reason why they exist. Otherwise, there's no justification. There's a phrase in the Talmud which has two versions. One version is, Ani nivreisi l'shamash eskaini. I was created to serve my master. It's one way of phrasing this line in the Talmud. The other way is, Ani lo nivreisi. I was not created el l'shamash eskaini, for no other purpose than to serve my master. In other words, the premise is, I wasn't created. Oh, there's a master who needs to serve? Okay, we'll create you. Or you were created. Now, what are you going to do with your life? You're going to serve God. The conclusion is the same, but it's a very different perspective. Which reality is obvious and which reality is discovered? Is godly reality obvious and you discover, oh, there happens to be an earth that needs to serve God? Or is it the reverse? The world we have is the obvious reality. But if you dig a little deeper, you find out that the world is all about God. That's the difference between Shema Yisrael versus Baruch Shem. Shema Yisrael is the godly reality. This is just God. Yeah, and he happens to also make existence. Baruch Shem says we have an existence, and we dig a little deeper and find out that God is sovereign over this existence. Yeah?
It's important to have
Sorry.
both these views.
Yeah, both these. Well, that's true. That's true.
It's a dialectic between the two of them.
That's right. The ultimate actually is the fusion of the two.
Of course.
Yeah, that's correct. You going to say something?
I was going to say that if we take the view, for example, of God said we need candles, and therefore candles came into existence because God
Right.
said we need candles, then there are so many other things on earth that we don't, as
Right.
Jews,
Right.
use
Right.
In a holy way.
That's right. So the question is, the onus is on who to prove what, right? In the perspective of the Baruch Shem, so the world just exists. It doesn't need to justify itself. We now have to seek out ways to sanctify it. In the other view, God's the only reality. Now we have to justify why these other things exist, which is indeed a real study to go justify why all these things exist and what purpose they serve. But the premise is they're only created to serve God. Otherwise, they have no justification. And how we serve God with that is a good question, and we have to investigate. Right? But still, the premise is that there are no other justification for their existence other than the fact that that God created them.
Well, in my little mind, I see the whole world as existing, coexisting. One thing has to exist because of the other, and certain parts of that are holy to us,
Right.
and we sanctify it, and we do it according to what's written.
Right. So now it's true. So today we have more understanding of the ecosystem. We can understand how so many things aren't like making this cup. There are probably hundreds of people involved in making this cup and selling this cup and all the different places in the earth that it came from. So that's true. The whole ecosystem is interconnected, and therefore whatever we do has a much greater effect than just the particular cup we're making a bracha on the water for. It's much broader. That's true. So all of this is to say...
No, but my question is, how does it fit into
Oh, how does it fit into this?
Yeah. Like, what is true?
Oh, which one of these two perspectives are true? She's right. They're both true.
We have to work together.
Which is why we say Shema and Baruch Shem. But usually we're stuck in the Baruch Shem paradigm because we perceive reality as obvious.
Okay.
Right? So what does this have to do with Chanukah? So as the Yesod V'Shorish Avodah points out, the phrase Shema Yisrael has 25 letters, and therefore he says on Chanukah, Chanu Chaf Hei, the 25 letters of Shema, this viewpoint from the God's perspective, so to speak, is available on Chanukah. So on Chanukah we can tap into not our usual perspective, which says the world is the obvious reality and we have to dig to find godliness. On Chanukah we're given access to a viewpoint which says God's the only reality, and therefore there's existence. And that's the Chaf Hei, the 25 letters of Shema, are Chanu, are rested, are present during Chanukah. Okay, so to recap what we did so far, it's one translation with three meanings. Chanukah divided into two words, Chanu Chaf Hei, they rested on the 25th. Rest on 25th means what? Either rested on the 25th, they rested from battle, historically. Resting on the 25th means there's some element of not working during Chanukah, while the menorah is lit, or some other customs. And finally, in the spiritual sense, the 25 letters of Shema are resting, are present during Chanukah. Now we get to the next one. Number 2 here. This comes from the early Rishonim, from the post-Talmudic commentaries, specifically the Abu Dirham and others, and they say like this: the word Chanukah is a Rashi Tevis. Rashi Tevis means that each letter represents another word. So I highlighted in number 2 there. You can see I underlined the letters that spell the word Chanukah, and it goes like this: the ches of Chanukah is ches, the nun of Chanukah is neres. So 8 candles. Vav is v'halacha, and the law. Kibbeis Hillel follows the house of Hillel. So within the word Chanukah, you have an allusion to specific halachas, specific customs with respect to Chanukah. 8 candles, and we follow the law of Hillel. So we'll start with the second one before the first one. So the second one is we follow the law of Hillel. That's simple enough. Shammai says we go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hillel says you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we follow Hillel. Easy enough. Where's 8 candles? 8 candles and not what? Like, what else would I assume? What else would I assume and not 8 candles and not what? What else would I assume, right? With Hillel, I might assume I follow Shammai. But why would I do 9?
Because of the Shamash. The Shamash doesn't count.
Shamash is not part of the menorah, right?
I know.
So this is something interesting.
Okay.
There is actually a dispute amongst halachic historians about the following scenario. Imagine you're a Jew living in Babylonia during the end of the Second Temple period. So it's after the holiday of Chanukah has been established. It's after the Hashmonayim. The temple's been rededicated. The holiday of Chanukah, the Talmud says, was instituted the year after the first Chanukah. So you're living 100 years after Chanukah, but the temple is still around. And you're living in Babylonia. So it's after Chanukah, but it's before the calendar has been set.
Why are you living in Babylonia?
You happen to be. I don't know, just hypothetical.
Okay.
You're living there.
All right.
And so it's after the story of Chanukah, but before the calendar has been set.
Oh, okay.
So you don't know when the first day of the month is. Right? The days of the month were established based on witnesses back in Jerusalem when the moon was seen. So Rosh Chodesh is either 1 of 2 days. That's why we have 2 days of Yom Tov, of Pesach, Shavuos, or whatever. So if you're living in Babylonia, before the Second Temple is destroyed, before the calendar is established, but you don't know, but Chanukah is already in existence. So when do you light menorah?
25, 24. Oh,
You don't know.
25,
So on the first day of Chanukah, you'd light 1 candle. On the second day, you'd light 2 menorahs. One with 1 candle, and one with 2 candles, because maybe it's day number 2. On day number 3, you'd light with 2 candles, and then 3,
Oh.
and so on and so forth. Which would mean, at least according to many halachic historians, you would have been lighting 9 days of Hanukkah, 9 candles. So therefore comes this little allusion and says 8 and not 9. Don't think that just because when it comes to Pesach we keep 2 days because they used to keep 2 days, don't think you have to keep 9, because it's possible that some people used to keep 9 back then.
But why not?
Why don't we?
Yeah.
It's a good question. So there are different ways of looking at it, and one of them is as follows. There's a rule in the Talmud which is Heim Amru ve'Heim Amru, which means like this. The sages themselves are the ones who instituted Hanukkah. So they themselves can choose to set the parameters as they see fit. So when there's a biblical holiday, so the sages can't set the parameters, they just have to do their best to protect it. So to protect Pesach, they're telling you celebrate 2 days. When it comes to Hanukkah, they themselves instituted the holiday. They're going to tell you to keep an extra day to protect from what? Okay. From something they instituted? Mm-hmm. So they say, okay, we've instituted Hanukkah, and we're telling you 8 days, don't make yourself crazy, you don't need to do 9 days. And therefore, that's what this,
My question is,
yeah.
really on the 25th, they would have figured out when Chodesh was.
Depends how far you are. It depends how easy travel is.
Because like Purim, you could say Purim, they had also 2 days. Because Purim is the 14th of the month, so
The same discussion ensues there as well. About what some people didn't return to Israel with Ezra to build the second temple, so they were still back there. So what day of Purim they would have, the same discussion is there. It comes from the same place. There's a famous Quran at the beginning of Megillah where he discusses the history of the celebration of Purim, and he mentions Hanukkah also. In fact, if I remember correctly, the Rabbeinu B'chaya says that on the day after Hanukkah you should have a quasi-celebratory meal to remember that there were people who might have used to be celebrating an extra 9th day. Something we don't think of. But here it is in the word of Hanukkah.
Let's eat, no problem.
No fee.
Another excuse
Yeah.
to eat.
So in the name Hanukkah you have this little hint. 8 candles and not 9.
Wow.
And the halacha follows Hillel and not Shammai. Okay. So that's translation number 2.
That's great. Must be there right before.
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that was translation number 2. The first was resting, and the different types of resting. Resting from war, resting from work, or resting of God's presence in the Shema Yisrael. And then the second is the 8 candles, and the law follows Hillel. Now the third translation of the word Chanukah. Now this third translation, to my mind, is probably the most historically accurate. Meaning, if we were to imagine why the name Chanukah was set, or how it evolved, it's probably out of this. The word Chanukah comes from the word Chanukas, right? When you build a new home, you have a Chanukas Habayis, which means you dedicate the home, right? So during a time when the temple was not destroyed but defiled by the Greeks, they put idol in there and of kind of pagan ideas, and they brought spiritual impurity. So when they reclaimed the temple, they re-purified it and rededicated it. Specifically, there's even a view that the altar itself was destroyed and had to rebuild it. But at any rate, they certainly rededicated the building of the temple. And this is probably where the name Chanukah comes from at the time, because it was a massive celebration. This was the symbol of them reclaiming Jewish faith and reclaiming Jerusalem, right? Because earlier, actually, a Jewish priest was just a puppet priest of the Greeks, removed Judaism as the official religion of Jerusalem, and now this was reinstating Jerusalem as the capital of Judaism, reclaiming the faith, and this was came in rededicating the temple. When you read the Al Nissim, the extra prayer we add in the grace after meals and benching, and in the Amidah, it describes how when we went back in there, we made a whole feast, and we cleaned it up, and we put lights, and we purified it, etc. So historically, this is probably the most accurate translation. Chanukah came from the celebration of rededicating the temple. But it has a deeper meaning also, and that is as follows. And I wrote here, Chanukah's HaMizbeach, rededicating the temple, times 2. And the reason why I wrote times 2 is because there's a medrash who says the following. When the Jews sinned with the golden calf, right, Moses went up the mountain 3 times. Went up, down, between Shavuos and Yom Kippur, he went up and down 3 times, each time for 40 days. Finally, on Yom Kippur, Moses comes down and says, you're forgiven. And then Moses says, God's now instructing you to build the Mishkan, to build this tabernacle in the desert, and God's presence is going to be there, and this is going to be the symbol that God fully forgave you because God's presence is here. God's presence is in this home. So the Jews are super excited. They get to work right away. When did they actually when did they actually erect the Mishkan and dedicate it?
25th of Kislev?
In Nisan.
Oh.
Nisan.
Right? At the beginning of Nisan, the first, it's not off. We'll see in a second. In the first 12 days of Nisan, we read the Nisim, we read the description, that's right, we read the description of each prince from each tribe, bringing offerings, dedicating the Mishkan. So the question is, what took so long? Why did it take all the way from Yom Kippur, 5.5 months or so later? So the Medrash says the Jews were actually so eager to get this Mishkan built, because God's forgiveness is symbolized there, that they got to work right away. And they were ready to build it in Kislev. But God told them not to. Now, we can only tell what the Medrash says. The reason is because God wanted the Mishkan to be built, to be assembled, in the month that Yitzchak Avinu was born, which is Nisan. Why? Can't tell you. That's what it says. Right? Yep.
Okay.
God wanted to wait till the month of Nisan. So it was deferred. So there's a whole bunch of material waiting to be assembled since Kislev, through Teves, Shvat, Adar, and then finally it gets erected.
So that means they
deferred.
carried all this equipment as
I don't know if they traveled.
wandered?
Well, they did do that in between traveling, but I don't know if at this point they were traveling.
Okay.
I don't know if they traveled then. But usually they did. They disassembled it, traveled, and reassembled it
That
wherever
I
the new
know,
location.
But I'm just saying if it was supposed
Yeah,
to
they
be
may have.
they
I don't know if they were
traveled
traveling during that 5 months period. I don't know. At any rate, the Medrash tells us that the month of Kislev was upset. The month of Kislev was offended. We the month of Kislev would have had a dedication, and now it's being deferred to Nisan. Mm-hmm. So God said, don't worry, I'll pay you back. And they got paid back in Chanukah when the rededication of the temple took place in Kislev. So here's the third meaning of the word Chanukah, dedication of the temple, both the rededication right after the story of Chanukah when they reclaimed the temple, but it's also emblematic of what would have been the dedication of the Mishkan in the desert. Okay, so that's translation number 3. Now we get to translation number 4. This translation is somewhat Kabbalistic and includes some gematrias. So if you like numerology, this is where we're at.
Not here.
Sorry?
But
It's not wild doors,
is this
but they're meant
chinuch
for young
that
Yeah.
we're talking about when it says chinuch, rededication, the word for education?
Yes,
is-
that's right.
is
I was
really-
going to say that in a second, right.
Later, okay.
Dedication and education come from the same root word, because when you're beginning, because you're beginning a project of life, so you're dedicating it and educating it on the right path, and you're building a new home, so you're dedicating,
But you're also, you're dedicated, the temples were
dedicated to God, right? So hopefully that's what an education does, right? Okay, so this is the next translation. Chanukah comes from the word chinuch and education. This comes from the Bnei Yisachar, and he says like this: the education of Chanukah is that the menorah candles, the lights of Chanukah, are educating us and getting us accustomed to the light of Mashiach. This is what he says. So where's the illusion for this? So he says like this. Right, we know at the beginning, the sun and the moon were created on what day of creation? On what day of creation?
The first, well, no.
Sun and the moon?
No, the sun and the moon on the, when's the fourth?
On the fourth day.
Yeah,
But there is light created earlier.
first day.
What light is that?
The infinite light, right?
So that's not a literal light, but it's a light, the godly light. When Adam is banished from the Garden of Eden, that light is hidden and waiting for Mashiach to come, and then that's when that light is revealed. It's what's referred to in Kabbalah as the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light. Or HaTov HaGanuz, the goodly hidden light. So there's a medrash, the Psikita, which tells us the following: that Adam Rishon, Adam himself, spent 36 hours in the Garden of Eden when he enjoyed that light. He enjoyed that light for 36 hours. The 24 hours of Shabbos, and then the couple of hours before Shabbos when he messed up. So during that time, he
36 hours. I thought he was created
on Friday.
Thursday. That's where is it, 36 hours?
He was only banished after Shabbos is over.
I know, but he had darkness at night. No, there's no darkness.
No, not we're talking about a literal light. We're talking about a godly spiritual light.
Oh, okay.
This godly spiritual light that God hides and puts away from Mashiach's coming,
Oh,
Adam enjoyed of this
okay.
Or HaGanuz, this hidden light, for 36 hours.
Okay.
Why is the number 36 significant? Just any accountants here? 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8? It's 36. There are 36 candles we light over Chanukah. So says the sorry?
44 is included.
Including the Shamash, that's right. That's right, that's right.
44.
So there are 36 lights of the menorah total. So says the Bnei Yisachar, these 36 candles that we light in the menorah are an allusion to the 36 hours that Adam enjoyed of the hidden light, because the menorah is a foretaste of the hidden light's exposure once Mashiach comes.
Whoa.
Furthermore, when God creates the light, it says, Vayar Elokim es or ki tov. God saw the light, that it was good. You ever the little, on top of the Torah, there's like these little crowns on top of some of the letters?
Mm-hmm.
So this the tests that make the first letter of the word tov, has 4 crowns. Tess numerical value is 9. 9 times 4 is 36. So again, this connection. The good light, which has allusion to 36 in its word tov, there's 36 hours that Adam enjoyed it before he was banished in the Garden of Eden, alluded to in the 36 candles we light over Chanukah. Furthermore, he says, when God created the light, it says, Vayihi Or, God said, let there be light. So I write it out here. The second circle under 4, Yihi Or, let there be light, equals, numerical value is 232. Yud is 10, Hey 5, and then 10, it's 25. Aleph 1 is 26, plus 6 is 32, and then Yud Resh is 232. So Yehi Or equal, let there be light, equals 232. What's the significance of 232? So he explains like this. There's a Kabbalistic idea. Well, before we get to that, one of the ways in which you can do gematria, one of the ways in which you can calculate the numerical value of something, is what's known as male. That is, you take each letter and you spell it out like a word. Each letter is a word, and right. So that's right. So the word aleph, the letter aleph, is also a word. Aleph is spelled aleph lamed fei, and aleph means aloof because it's lofty, elevated, or something like that, right? Beis yud. The letter Beis is spelled out Beis yud saf, means a home. Gimel, and so on and so forth. Each letter is a word, and then that word has a numerical value. Okay? So the same thing is true of Hashem's name. Hashem's name is Yud, Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. So there's a numerical value which is based on the way it's spelled out. Now I spelled it out for you at the bottom here. Now when it comes to Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, there's something interesting. Because the letter Hey and the letter Vav can be spelled in different ways. The letter Hey can be spelled Hey Yud. So there are two Heys in Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. So when you're doing a mole, when you're doing the full number, it'll change based on how you're spelling the letter Hey. It can be spelled Hey Yud, it can be spelled Hey Hey, which would make it only 10. It can be spelled Hey Aleph, which is 6, or it can be spelled Hey Hey, which is 10.
Hey, Yud.
Hey Yud, which is 15, Hey Aleph, 6, or Hey Hey, 10. Likewise, the word Vav can be spelled Vav Yud Vav, Vav Aleph Vav, or just Vav Vav. So you can see on the bottom of the sheet here, I go through all of them. And the bottom line is there are 4 different ways in which these combinations are made in Kabbalah, and each of them symbolize a different manifestation of God's name. One is Shem Av, the name Av. Av meaning Ayin Vez, not Av as in father, but Ayin Vez, because it's 72. One being Sag, Samach Gimel, 63. One being Ma, which is Mem He, 45, Ban, 52. Each of these symbolize a different manifestation of God's name. Very briefly, Av is divine pleasure, Sag is divine desire, Ma is divine wisdom, and Ban is God's creative force, Malchus. So altogether, it's 232. So says the Bnei Yisachar. When God says, let there be... Ban, creative force. Malchus. So all of these come together, 72 plus 63 plus 45 plus 52, to equal 232. So says the Bnei Yisachar. When God says, let there be light, the numerical value of let there be light is 232, alluding to the completion of every possible manifestation of God's name, these 4 different kinds coming to 232. Because the hidden light that God created at the beginning, which is waiting for Mashiach's coming, is the full expressions of God's name. That's what Mashiach is. The definition of Mashiach, certainly from the Kabbalistic sense, but even in the halachic sense, the way Maimonides defines Mashiach is the time when the occupation of the entire world will be nothing other than the knowledge of God himself. In other words, you look around and you see divine reality. Talking about the Shema Yisrael before. You see the divine reality. So the full entirety of the divine reality is alluded to in the number 232, because that's all 4 combinations of God's name. You following? Which is Yehi Or, the numerical value of let there be light.
And it's a miracle that we're following.
And this Yehi Or, this light, symbolized by 232, the full expression of God's name, was Adam enjoyed of that for 36 hours, alluded to in the 36 candles we light in the menorah, being that the menorah is a foretaste of Mashiach's coming. And that's the translation, says the Bnei Yisachar, of the word chinuch, education. Because Chanukah is educating us for what's to come when Mashiach comes. When we fully experience the 232, this let there be light, the full expression of God's presence. Yeah?
There's some holidays we won't be celebrating after Mashiach comes.
So according to some opinions, Chanukah is included in the list that we do celebrate. Purim certainly, but there are some that say even Chanukah as well. That's a good point, yeah, very good. Sorry?
I wasn't sure if Chanukah was included, but the way you...
There's opinions about that.
Like, it represents the light
Of Mashiach, and it should be available, right?
It should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so with me so far?
Yeah.
So far we have 4 translations of the word Chanukah.
Very good.
Chanukah, they rested on the 25th, resting from war halachically, or resting the 25 letters of Hashem's name, the 25 letters of Shema, the presence of God. Chanukah alluding to 8 candles, and the law follows Hillel. Number 3 is Chanukah, meaning dedication, because it dedicated the temple, which was emblematic of the dedication that should have been in the desert. And number 4, Chanukah, meaning education, because it's an education for what's to come with Mashiach's coming. Alluded to the 36 candle lights, which is emblematic of the 36 hours that Adam enjoyed, the hidden light, symbolized in 232, as we explained. Now finally, we get this last translation, which is Chinuch Hey, the light, or educating the Hey, the letter Hey, bringing something down into the letter Hey. What's the letter Hey? So this comes from the Tzemach Tzedek and explains as follows. He explains by contrasting the light of the menorah that was lit in the temple versus the light that we light today at Chanukah. 3 basic differences I put down here. Number 1, our menorah is lit outside the home, facing the street, whereas the menorah in the temple is indoors. The menorah in the temple only had 7 candles. We have 8 candles. And number 3, the menorah in the temple is primarily lit during the day, even though it could also be lit at night, but it's primarily lit during the day, lit every morning for sure. And the menorah we do is primarily to be lit at night. So the differences are as follows. He says like this. The heichal, the sanctuary in which the menorah was lit, he says alludes to Hey Kol, the last 2 letters of heichal, Chaf Lamed equal 50. 50 is what's known as the 50 gates of Bina, of understanding. Not getting too complicated. It means the divine intellectual system. Just put it that way. So what does it mean to light the menorah in the divine intellectual system? So the technical Kabbalistic terms are bringing Chachma into Bina, or Nekuda Behechala, bringing the point into the chamber. So I'll explain what this means. So think of intelligence, right? The idea of intelligence. Intelligence is supposed to be objective. That's the idea. You're supposed to be able to see things objectively. The reality is, none of us are objective, for a very simple reason. Our brains are in us, and you can't escape yourself. You just can't. You can't escape yourself. So as much as you try to be objective, you're still viewing whatever you're looking at through your own experiences, through your own understanding, through your own, whatever you understand prior to what you're looking at. So you're never really looking at things fully objectively, right? Because you are always present in your mind, right? Now for humanity, that's a downside, right? Because we can't be fully objective. But when you're talking about your relationship with God, you do want God to be present in his intellectual system. You want to bring the Ein Sof, you want to bring the infinite into the divine intellectual system. So if God's running a world using some intellectual apparatus, you want God to be present in that. Mm-hmm. Following? You're bringing the eye of God, so to speak, into the intellectual system of God. Following? Somewhat?
It's very, very lofty.
It's a little lofty. Little ideas.
We're tasting it.
Another way of putting it is like this. Every idea or every concept begins with just that, a concept. It's a kernel. It's a little idea, right? And then you develop it into full explanation. You take that idea and you develop it and you explain things and you answer things and you apply it here, you apply it there. So these 2 stages is Chachma versus Bina. The idea came from just me, somewhere in there. It's not like you did something to make that idea pop out of your head. Sometimes, actually, you do nothing to make the idea pop into your head, right? When you're trying to solve a problem and you can't do it, what you do is you rest and try again tomorrow with fresh perspective, right? Because you want nothing to be in your head so that the idea can pop out of nowhere. That comes from you. Then once that idea is given to you from somewhere deep in your subconscious, then you develop it, right? But when you develop the idea, you have to be true to the original kernel. Otherwise, you're diverting away, right? So you're losing what you've given to the idea if you don't remember that. This is referred to in Kabbalah as Nekuda Behechala. You're keeping the point within the chamber. The chamber being the full explanation and the whole intellectual apparatus, and the point being, don't lose focus of what we're talking about here. Right? That's the menorah in the temple. The temple is the divine system. Lighting the menorah is bringing the divine presence, so to speak, bringing the eye of God into the system of God, into God's system. Following? That's why it's indoors. That's why it's during the day, because it doesn't have to be at any other time. It's a place of light. It's a place of godliness. And that's why it's 7. Because 7 is symbolic of perfection. 7 days of the week. It's the perfect system, the perfect divine system.
Digital sum, 7.
The digital sum of 232. Yeah. 7 symbolizes the perfect creative force, where God's invested in this intellectual system, and this intellectual system runs all of the earth, runs all of existence. That's the menorah in the Heichal, and the sanctuary. The menorah we light is more than that. The menorah we light is outside. The menorah we light is we're trying to bring God's presence not into the divine system. We're trying to bring godliness to a place where God is not obvious. We're trying to bring it to the darkness at night, outdoors. To do that, you have to tap into the number 8. 8 being one above the system. If 7 symbolizes the perfect divine system of nature, 8 is God's transcendence. transcends all of existence. And when you tap into a level of transcendence, then you could bring divine reality even to a place of darkness. That's chinuch hey, bringing down, educating the letter hey. The Gemara tells us, the verse says, Ki b'kotzer elamim, for Ka, for Yud Hey, is the rock of the worlds. So says the Gemara, with the letter Yud, God created the world to come, the spiritual realm. And with the letter Hey, God created the physical realm. So the letter Hey symbolizes God's creative force in a world of distance, in a world of darkness, in a physical world where God's presence is not obvious. And Chanukah is about chinuch Hey, educating the Hey, educating the world about divine reality. Bring the divine reality to a place of darkness, to the physical world that where God's not obvious. Not like the temple where God's obvious and you're lighting the oil because you're bringing some deep level of divine into the divine system. This is not about perfecting the divine system. This is about bringing God into a place where he's not obvious, where the system is not clear, to a place of darkness at night. So for that, you got to tap into the letter, to the eight candles. Are you with me? So to recap all the translations of Chanukah.
Yeah, we're with you with the seatbelt.
Yeah? There's a lot going on, I know. The first is they rested on the 25th. Rest on the 25th either means they rested from battle. Yeah?
Can you tell me about the 25th? Is that like you don't have to work the whole day?
So there's different customs. There are different customs. Some don't work the whole day. Some don't work the first and last day of Chanukah. Some don't work only when the menorah is lit. There are different customs about it. But there is an idea of resting on the 25th. And that's one of the illusions we mentioned at the beginning.
It's like with Aglo on Victoria, he was closed.
On the first day of Chanukah, really?
On Kalamoed also he's closed usually.
Well, good for him.
But I
Yeah?
I said, who's there? I thought, who's Aglo near the kosher bakery in Victoria?
Yeah? Anyway, let's
I
recap.
thought maybe he was at a Levi or something.
Yeah.
I didn't stay, but
Now, it could be he's closed for Chanukah. It's possible.
okay.
Okay, so let's recap.
It's on vacation.
Yeah. The first translation, Chanukah Hey, they rested on the 25th, and 3 different levels of rest. Resting because they rested from the battle on the 25th of Kislev. Resting because there's an element of resting from work on Chanukah, to whatever degree. And the resting of the presence of 25, the resting of the Shema Yisrael, which is 25 letters. That's the first translation. The next is, Chanukah is an allusion to Ches Neres, 8 candles, 8 and not 9. The halachic Beis Hillel and the law follows Hillel, where we go 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, as opposed to 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Finally, number 3, Chanukah meaning dedication, because they rededicated the temple after reclaiming it, which is a payback for the lack of dedication in Kislev in the desert. Number 4, Chanukah comes from the word education, because it educates us for what is to come in the times of Mashiach. The 36 candles we light, 1 plus 2 plus 3, etc., alluding to the 36 hours that Adam enjoyed the hidden light at the beginning of creation. And then finally, Chinuch Hey, we are educating the letter Hey. We are bringing God's presence to the letter Hey, which is a world of creation, a world of distance, a world of darkness. And for that, we tap into number 8, a level of transcendence, and not just 7, which is a perfect divine system, but rather the transcendence. Okay?
Also, that in the Torah, I'm sure everybody knows this, but just in case someone doesn't, if you